All right, moving on, I'd like to recognize Jamie Feddersen from the Waterfowl Program Leader to discuss the preview of the Waterfowl 2018-19 season recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. It just seems a little odd that we're talking about season recommendations for next year when we haven't even finished this year, but the way the timing works and how we have to inform the Fish and Wildlife Service about things, this is really the best time for us to sit and talk about seasons for next year. So I am here today to talk to you about next year's migratory game bird hunting seasons. Specifically, what you'll be looking at is Proclamation 1802. So I'll just, to let you know what's on deck, I'm going to talk to you about some public input that we've received and which has helped formulate the recommendations for our seasons. We've taken, in your packets, you'll probably see two proclamations from last year, which are completely redlined. We're taking both of those proclamations. We had two separate ones, and we're going to combine them into one proclamation now. So all of our migratory game bird proclamation, all of our migratory game bird hunting seasons and bag limits will be in one proclamation. We used to do it in two separate ones, but now we're one combined one. You'll also see some significant changes to how the season dates are. We're moving towards the generic wording of the season dates rather than very specific dates, and this falls in line with how we have our other hunting season proclamations, big game, small game, and it also fits really well into what Director Wilson was talking about with the two-year season setting. We have some slight changes to season dates and bag limits that I'll present to you. These are based on some federal, some Fish and Wildlife Service changes. We have some modifications to our youth waterfowl season that I'll talk about, and then we've restructured some of our goose seasons, which I think you'll like the end point of where we came with those. So the public input we received, we advertised in our hunting guide, our waterfowl hunting guide, that we would accept input from October 15th through November 15th. We realized my error. I didn't get a news release out in time to remind folks that October 15th was the day. So we got one out, we extended it until November 30th. We put it out through news release, social media, our TWRA website, and in total, we received 72 individual comments. 15 of those were during that very specific October-November comment period where we asked for migratory game bird season recommendation and input. The other 57 came back from January and February when we solicited input for our general hunting season recommendations. So at that time, people would comment on migratory game bird seasons. So we weren't doing anything with those at the time when we did our general hunting season proclamation. So we held on to those, used those in consideration for these seasons. But and again, I think that's in January and February, that's when people are really thinking about what they want in their season for next year. And again, it just has to do with the timing of the way things go. A lot of our comments were specific towards WMA management or access, and so we forward those on to the area managers. These aren't necessarily things that will be reflected in this proclamation. The other big one was duck seasons into February, which we can't do based on the frameworks that we get from the Fish and Wildlife Service. We just can't have the seasons extend into February. The other ones we get a lot of opposition to. Sandhill crane hunting is another big one that we get. So I want to focus on this generic wording because this is a pretty big change when it comes to the waterfowl one. For our other migratory game birds, the woodcock, the dove, snipe, things like that, we've been using the generic wording in our proclamation. So none of that's really changed. The big change comes with our waterfowl season dates. And so, as an example, what you'll see in your packet, rather than very specific dates, is what you might used to be seeing. You'll see this using this example right here with the remainder of state. So duck season would now. We always hunt in 2 phases. We're just going to actually call them 2 phases now. And the phase 1 will open up on the 4th Saturday in November and closes the following day. Phase 2 would open up the first Saturday following the close of phase 1 and continues through the last Sunday in January. Now, it sounds a little bit convoluted, but if you look at it on a calendar, it's actually pretty easy to follow. So phase 1 is going to open up on the 4th Saturday in November, and then it's going to close the following day. Phase 2 is going to open on the first Saturday following phase 1, and then close on the last Sunday in January. So I'm just going to pause here real quick. If anybody has any questions on how we came about with that. I mean, it's...
Since we, my fellow duck hunters here have quizzed about, and you said you couldn't open, or couldn't have it open in February, why can't we take it to January 31st?
Well, again, that falls under the federal frameworks that we're given. As they currently stand, we can't set a hunting, we can't end our waterfowl season any later than the last Sunday in January. That's what we're allowed. Now, what I can say at this point is we are in discussions with the Fish and Wildlife Service. We have been for several years trying to get them to come off of that end date to get us to that January 31st end date. Looks pretty promising. Commissioner Cook's warned me out a couple of times on this one, but it looks promising. We are, like I said, we're moving forward. We're having discussions with them. I think the reality is we'll probably see this within the next few years. I'm really hoping that we're going to be able to see this ending on January 31st date.
A few to you might be a different few to me, mightn't it?
Well, it'll take us.
Now, is it the same way in other states?
Oh yeah, this is nationwide. I'm pretty certain that every state has to follow this. I'm pretty certain that the January 30 or the last Sunday in January is for, I think, all of the flyways.
Can you check on that?
I'll double check on that for sure, but I'm pretty certain that that's the case.
I don't think
If
there's nothing
if there
illegal.
is a difference, it would probably be in the Pacific Flyway, but I'm not certain.
Okay, because that's where I was actually at when I thought, well, I'm speaking for Kansas. I hunt out there a lot. They
Okay.
closed
Central
theirs.
Flyway. I'll double check when we're
Okay.
done with this. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right. So generic wording. This is how it would fall out on the calendar. And so all of our waterfowl and our goose seasons are all set up with this sort of generic wording. So that the nice thing about this is that it allows hunters to know what we're thinking ahead of time. They can plan, knowing that these are when the seasons are going to fall every year. Not these specific days, but how it falls out on the calendar. Obviously, the fourth Saturday in November is not always November 24th. So as the calendar moves around, we always know that it's going to open on that fourth Saturday. All right, so I'm just going to go over real quick. I'm going to present to you what the actual season dates will be. I'm going to show you the early season migratory game birds first. Basically, the take-home message here is that there have not been any changes in the federal frameworks. What I'm showing you is calendar date changes only. And at this point, we're taking the maximum number of days that we can with the maximum bag limits that we can. So these are just calendar date changes from what we have always done. I'll just give you a minute to soak that in. You also have it in your packages.
Do any of the seasons have breaks? Does crow season have breaks?
Well, crow season has a break only in that you can only hunt on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So the break would be those other days that you're not allowed to hunt. But other than that, no, none of these seasons have a break. We'll see those breaks when we look at the dove seasons. There is with doves.
Question,
Yes.
on the crows, is it up to us to have the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or all week? Do we set that, or does the federals?
No, we set that.
Okay.
But we're only, we have maximized the amount of time that we can have them, have that season open. So there's a very, there is a time frame when we can have it open, and there's a certain number of days that we can have within that time
I
frame.
guess that was my question.
And so we're maximizing the length of the year. We have a really long season for them by only hunting them 3 days out of the week.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next set of dates that I'm going to show you are for our waterfowl and coot. We've had a couple of slight changes in our federal frameworks, and they're mainly in bag limits, so I'll point those out to you when we get to them. Here's what our duck seasons will be looking like, and you'll note that the bold, italic, and underlined in the daily bag limits, where we have an increase in the daily bag limit of pintails. We're going from 1 to 2 this year, and we're also having an increase in black ducks. We're going from 1 to 2 black ducks, and which is, I think that's the first time in history we might have had 2 black ducks. So they're doing pretty well. Their management strategy says that we can have 2 black ducks, so we're going to take advantage of that. So that's really the only major changes we have with ducks and coots this year. A couple of bag limit changes. For our youth waterfowl season, we have made a change to the ages that can participate. The Fish and Wildlife Service has given us some leeway in how we describe our age. Before it was set by the federal rule that it had to be a child 15 years of age or younger. Since a lot of states define their youth differently than that, some states a youth is 17 and younger, so they gave the states the leeway to use what their definition of a youth was. So what we did was we changed it from 15 to include 16-year-olds. So we're using the age range of 6 to 16. That falls in line with how our other youth hunt programs work. So youth deer hunts, 6 to 16 years of age. Youth turkey hunts, 6 to 16. So we did that just to fall in line with that. Made a lot of sense to us. We got some input from our law enforcement. One of the changes that they'd like to see is they'd like to have non-hunting adults along with those youth to really focus on those folks paying attention to the kids, mentoring them, and not participating in a hunt themselves. Okay, so we've changed some wording to have a non-hunting adult chaperoning these kids in the field.
Jimmy, sorry to interrupt, but in that discussion with law enforcement, was there a discussion of closing goose season during those 2 days?
Yeah, there was some discussion about closing those seasons, and it gets a little bit convoluted because if we were to close on those days, we would have to forfeit those days. We couldn't create additional create additional phases. So we're allowed a certain number of phases or segments within the federal rule. We can only, I think it's 4, we can have 4 segments for goose season. So if we were to close on one youth day and then open up again and then close on another, we can't do that and then not lose those hunting days. If we were, we would just have to close those down and we would lose those 2 hunting days altogether.
Can we prohibit the adult hunter from goose hunting? Just to, to take them out of the, not close the season or not close for those dates, but prohibit them from goose hunting? Because that's the argument they make.
Well, I think that's what we did. I think that's what we did with what we've got here, is that if somebody is hunting, or if somebody takes a child out, they're not going to be hunting, but anybody else who's not with a kid can go goose hunting. So we're not closing the season to everybody. It's just really those that are going to be taking the kids out.
Should we specify, be very specific, and just say, everybody knows they're not supposed to be duck hunting, and they some will sneak in and goose hunt. So should we make it very clear that they're prohibited from, just stating it, you're prohibited from duck hunting and goose hunting?
If you have a child with you,
If you have a child, yeah, if you're young.
because the child might be just goose hunting with you.
I think at this point, I might want to defer to either law enforcement or law enforcement on how we would word that, so.
I think when we did the wording on this, we took a great deal of time to figure out what wording we wanted in there. So if an adult is accompanying a juvenile on the youth hunt, they can't be participating in the goose hunt or duck hunt. Not just the ducks, but they can't be shooting out of that blind with that youth, or the boat, or whatever they're in. We didn't want to put blind because they could be hunting out of a field blind, or, off the bank or whatever. But our thought process here, first of all, we've had several complaints about the adults. This is optimum time for the youth to hunt, because we want to get them maximum shooting ability in February when there's more ducks and things like that. Just like with our deer hunts, our turkey hunts, we do those before to give them maximum opportunity to bring these new hunters into the field. And the last thing we want to do is have to go in a blind and sight them. The first thing they ever see is us sighting their daddy or their uncle or whoever their mentor is for shooting ducks when he's not supposed to be. So we just thought it would be best, after getting input from Region 1 especially, they have had a lot of input, and they've tried to propose this for years. And we got some numbers from Captain Elkins down in Region 1, and we've been making several cases on these from them doing spot and scopes on blinds, things like that. And we just think that these adults could surrender 2 days to hunt with these juveniles and mentor them and recruit new hunters into the field. And that's what we're trying to do and get that done. The wording, I think, that we have is suffice. If you're accompanying a youth in the field, you can't hunt goose or duck. Is that the language in the proclamation?
It says non-hunting adults. You could be a hunting adult and take a gun. It should say if you're hunting with a child in the juvenile season, you cannot participate in the goose season. You can't take a shot. You cannot shoot a gun. Or something like that, because right there.
Well, if they're non-hunting, they're not shooting.
I know,
You
but
can't hunt without
It
shooting.
doesn't say anything about adults. You can still goose hunt.
You can't hunt anything if you're non-hunting.
Yeah, but what if you're hunting?
You can't be.
It does not say
It
that.
says non-hunting. That's,
It says non-hunting adults, but I'm gonna be a hunting adult and I'm going with a child.
it says you can't.
Where does it say that?
Last sentence.
At least shall not, yes,
Shall not hunt.
Shall not hunt.
shall not hunt.
I only read the top part.
You're like a lot of people that read these things.
I'm reading correctly.
Well, I mean, it's true that, they know they're not supposed to shoot ducks. They know they're not supposed to, but they still try to get away with it and say, well, I was goose hunting. But, and if you read it, it does say non-hunting, so I agree. I didn't know if we just needed to emphasize, but if you're gonna try to cheat, you're gonna cheat, I guess.
Chairman, we went over, us and legal and wildlife, we sat down and went over this and went through 2 or 3 drafts to get the exact wording that prohibited that. We feel like we've created something that says that, from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. If y'all worked on it and you're happy, that's great.
I don't want to sacrifice these kids' hunt for an adult going out and shooting the ducks in there in the blind with them. And we spend a lot of time, and keep in mind, a lot of this is derived from complaints from the public. And you go and you set up with a spot and scope on one blind. When you're doing that, and District 12 has dedicated these officers to have to sit, every officer has to sit on a blind at least one of those 2 days and watch. And they've been very successful in apprehending people. But that's, there again, what I said first, that's not what we want to do. We want these kids to be excited about going back.
I've got this might be crazy, but if a hunter wants to goose hunt and wants a child to goose hunt, did they do that and not duck hunt?
They can waterfowl hunt. They can shoot ducks and geese.
No, I'm saying that hunter wants to, if he's gonna be with the adult, wants
They can't shoot a duck.
Can't shoot it up, but they can hunt geese. Yeah.
They could goose hunt.
Okay.
That's correct, right?
All right, wait a minute now. What's your question again?
No, they're not gonna duck hunt, they can go out and goose hunt together.
But when they kill a duck, they're in violation.
So, a hunter, an adult can take a shotgun to a blind on a youth hunt and shoot geese.
No. Oh, yeah, unless they only shoot geese.
That's what you just asked. You said
No, no, she said, could a youth and an adult go and just hunt geese, not shoot ducks? At all. But when they shoot one duck in that blind or with that kid, then he's in violation because it's on a waterfowl duck hunt. And if they're just goose hunting, then it wouldn't be a violation. Because goose is open to the child, the youth can shoot geese too.
but neither one of them can shoot ducks.
In that scenario, no. And Commissioner King, happy birthday. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, all right. So moving on, I had mentioned before that we had done some restructuring of our goose seasons. We've done it in such a way that now our September goose season completely overlaps September duck. That's not something that we've had in the past. We've got some additional hunting days that we've placed around the calendar. Now, our Canada goose, Brant, and light geese all have identical season dates, which is something that we've not had before. So really what we're doing is we are now maximizing the number of days and providing more opportunity for goose hunters. We've also got our white-fronted goose season, which has a shorter number of days than our other geese, but those the two phases that we have for white-fronted geese completely mirrors phases 3 and 4 with the other geese, and we'll take a look at that right now. So right now, white-fronted goose season, what we never had an open season for them over in the Reelfoot area. So right now we have a northwest goose zone which includes Reelfoot Lake. So now what this does is it allows, if somebody happens to be hunting on Reelfoot during that first opening weekend, if a white-fronted goose comes in, now they can go ahead and take one. We've also we were able to increase the bag limit of white-fronted geese from 2, which we've had in the past. Now we can have 3 birds per day. The changes that you see in Canada goose and Brant, again, just extending the season in September to overlap with the wood duck and the teal season. What we ended up having to do was we shaved a few days off in October to accommodate that, but other than that, nothing has really changed, except for remainder of state. We used to stop at the end of January for geese. Now we can you can hunt Canada geese through the second Sunday in February. So again, shifting some things around, but overall, more days. And with our snow geese, again, we didn't have an open season on them over in the Reelfoot area for that opening weekend. We never had a September or October season for them. It might be wishful thinking that we would see snow geese during that time, but on the rare chance that it does happen and somebody is out goose hunting in September and a snow goose comes by, now they have the opportunity to harvest one. So again, light geese, just mirroring the Canada goose seasons. More days, more opportunity. Less of a chance for somebody to do, taking birds out of season. Well, I think I went the wrong way. Oh, no, so I think I just wanted to recap that, that's what we had for changes with our goose seasons. We're still going to have our light goose conservation season. Opens up after all of the other goose seasons close, and I think we added a few extra days on there, so we're going to be going until sometime in mid-March with this season. Again, that season has some provisions. No, you You can use unplugged shotguns, you can use electronic calls, there's, expanded shooting hours, no daily bag limits. Sandhill crane season, no changes here. We're still going to be hunting them overlapped with the regular waterfowl season. Yeah, so no changes here. And that's it. If anybody has any questions, be certainly happy to entertain them.
Any questions from the commission? Just quickly, do you know why they changed the pintail? They dropped it to 1, just, we're not even through the next season, they've increased it.
Yeah,
I'm glad they did, but anyhow.
It all has to do with their harvest strategy, and it has to do with the previous year's harvest, and then the number of birds that they count on the spring breeding count. And so, when the numbers match up and fall out right, we get a liberal season, and that's it. It just all has to do with previous year's harvest and previous year's population count. So,
Any questions from the public? Jamie, thank you.
all right, great, thank you.
And that completes the